right, welcome to the Sprint 93 review. Next slide. All right, I'm taking over for Oleg as he's out, and John promised me double pay, so I'll do the UI as well. And then we have a surprise speaker, Julian, for providers. Very nice. Follow up with Tina for Automate, Gregg for Platform, and Chris for Doc as usual. Next slide. All right, so the repo stats, pretty typical. UI Classic is usually top, Manage IQ Core is second. Integration test usually tends to be up in the top as well. And then looks like V2V had probably some fixes for a lot of their features that they've put in and so on. Next slide. All right, it's pretty typical. We went down a little bit, but not too much, so still pretty busy trying to get some features in and not last minute features, but features that still have some work on them, as well as fixing bugs. So next slide. And true to form, a lot of enhancement PRs, as well as bug PRs. A little bit of technical debt and things still going on because as we see things, we try to clean them up as well. Next slide. All right, so these are nothing changing too much here. We did put some concerted effort into the UI Classic to try to get back to green as we were red the last two sprints, and being really careful about what we merge. You can see that went a little bit green, but everything else is kind of neutral there. Next slide. Turn it over to Dan. Okay, I'll take it. All right. There's the PR counts. Following kind of the master counts, we went down a little bit too. We're usually just over 100. You can see there's more bug fixes going on as well. Some of the other repos are doing things as far as UI is concerned as well. So some of the detailed bugs that were fixed, threshold values were missing in quite a few areas there, so we took care of that. When you had the related drop downs on the tagging screen where you'd pick the category and then the tags, if you click too fast or the server was slow, you could lock it up, lock up the screen anyway. The basic search for data stores was taken care of. We've seen that in a few places throughout the product, and we've been fixing those. The physical server provisioning page was broken when you would change the tabs. Let's see what else. The child orchestration stacks were not being, the links were not working when you were going to them from a different, rather than the main hierarchy when you were linking to them from another screen. And the ability to see the different catalogs. The thing is, in a hierarchy of catalogs, you can have the same name under different parents. So we fixed that so you can now see the whole parentage there. And a couple of V2V fixes, making sure the schedule is cleared. The problem was you could set a schedule, then if you wanted to unschedule it, it wouldn't note that it was unscheduled anymore, so you couldn't reschedule it, things like that. Just weren't able to go back and forth. And also, when you're looking at a plan, if it didn't have mapping info, it would kind of get stuck and just say it was loading it. So now we note that it's missing. Next slide. So just a couple enhancements here. Can display the plugin commit hashes when you look at the about instead of just getting the version. There's going to be a drop down. There's a drop down there for the plugin commit hashes, so you can see exactly what you're working with there. We're going to tune that up with a little styling, so I don't have a screenshot for that. We'll show that next sprint. And pluggable UI for Ansible playbooks. We got a few screens on that. Next slide. All right, so there you can see when you do the drop down to pick your catalog, when you're creating a catalog item, now you've got the full hierarchy of the parentage. So if you have duplicates, you can see that they're different. And next slide. And here in the V2V, there on the bottom, you can see that there's a mapping that doesn't exist. So they show that instead of sitting there trying to load it. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Martin Morosi. He's going to talk about the pluggable UI for Ansible playbooks. You there, Martin?
Yep. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to tell you something about the UI for the Ansible playbooks. Basically, we've added an option to our provider plugins to call the Ansible playbooks from UI, specifically from the toolbar that is available on the provider screens. If they need to collect some additional data, we also added a way so they can create their custom forms. And all of that is possible without making PRs to the UI repositories. So there are two ways, next slide please. There are two ways how you can create the form. First one is using custom React components. What you have to do, you obviously have to create your React component and register it to the ManageIQ component registry. Then you have to add a button to the toolbar, which will use the RX subscription. You have to specify the control provider dialogs and then the component name. And after you click the button, it will show you the model with your custom React component. In order to save the data or run the playbook, you're going to have to hook up the form to the Redux and also override onSave, onReset, and onCancel functions in the Redux. Next slide, please. And if you don't want any UI code inside your provider plugin, you can use the existing dialog player form. Again, you're going to have to create a new button on the toolbar. Again, you have to specify the controller provider dialogs, and then you have to add the actual schema for the form. Inside the dialog name field, you'll have to add the entity name and the action name so that you will know which endpoint you're going to have to use. And then there are some bits like success message and dialog titles. That's all from me. Thank you.
Martin. All right, we'll send it to Julian for providers.
Hi, welcome to the Providers Update, and welcome to everyone watching this later on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we've had a pretty good sprint for the providers. We've got a very good spread of PRs across all of the provider repositories, with Nuage having the most this sprint. Next slide, please. So we fixed a glitch, not in the matrix this time, but in the Nuage provider, where some of the events weren't being fired. So now they're able to delete subnets when we have a message received for each of the subnet zones. And all of those events are visible in the timeline. As well, with all of the other providers, we've had streaming refresh, and now Kubernetes and OpenShift have joined in the streaming refresh fun. It's still work in progress, but it means that we can get almost instantaneous results from all of the events. Next slide, please. And speaking of graph refresh, we're actually going to be extracting that into its own gem, so all of the repositories can use this. And so we've started moving some of the classes to put it all together to make that easier. And if streaming refresh is enabled, we're going to disable EMS refresh. So that's it for us. Tally ho, and over to Tina.
Thanks, Julian. Good morning. We had 30 PRs merged this sprint. For V2V, Fabian added a state machine phase attribute to the transformation state machines to indicate whether it's a transformation or cleanup state machine. vCenter was identified as a bottleneck for large parallel transformations. Fabian changed the VMware URI to point directly to the ESX host to help resolve this issue. VMware credentials containing backslashes were causing migration failures. Fabian escaped a user ID to resolve this issue. Fabian added spec tests and did some general refactoring to make code more generic and to make better use of embedded methods which reduce code duplication. For dialogues, DrewU fixed an issue where dialogue options were missing on generic object custom buttons, and Lucy extended the Ansible Tower Job dialogue support to include Ansible workflows. Next slide, please. Billy Fitz enhanced the log object embedded method to support logging for all attributes, association, and tags. For custom button events, Lucy populated custom button event timestamp and added an automate entry point. Tomas added a new custom button event namespace and UI class to the ManageIQ domain. Madhu resolved an issue where the MIQ stop was not being honored properly for state machines. MIQ stop is intended to stop the current leg of resolution, as opposed to MIQ abort, which is intended to abort the entire resolution. MIQ stop was working properly for non-state machine classes, but was aborting the entire resolution for state machines. Bill, we added a lock for MIQ requests and MIQ request tasks when using the set option method to update the options hash. And finally, Patrick resolved an issue where OpenURL was not working properly when using a dialog with custom button. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, Tina. On the platform side, we had 30 PRs merged, a few enhancements to talk about here. So we added key pairs, cloud networks, and networks to reporting expression support. So now you can include those as top-level items in reports and also expressions. Libor went through the chargeback and added a whole bunch of debug log messages to it, so that in the future, when there's issues with calculations, usually it's rates that don't get pulled in that cause costs to be calculated as zero, and those are very hard to troubleshoot. So this logging will help quite a bit for that. And Libor also added the ability to group by date only in chargeback. Grouping by date previously was date VM, and that affected how the subtotaling was done. So now you can group by date only and then get subtotals for every VM or every resource by date. And there's a little screenshot there of the selection in the chargeback report editor. Next slide, please. Okay, and a bunch of bug fixes here. Yuri had made a change to the default filter to exclude orphan archive objects for the running object filter. That's one of those built-in filters. A few changes here to chargeback and metering, a couple fixes from Libor. And Joe V did a bunch of fixes to the appliance console. So, minor fixes, quality of life type things that it took care of there. And Yuri also did a fix to the appliance console, which was crashing when failing to fetch V2 key. And last one there is another chargeback fix from Libor. And that's it for the platform. I think I turn it over to Chris. Next slide.
Hi, for documentation in this sprint, we had a total of 13 PRs merged, 11 of which addressed enhancements and 2 of which were bugs. The highlights in this sprint are we added a note about the maximum number of VM migrations. We've updated our docs to reference generic objects to match the GUI. We've added info on Ansible Tower workflows. We've split conversion host creation procedures into VDDK and SSH. And we've added the delete data store call to the REST API guide. That's it. Next slide, please.
Alrighty, so join us in 2 weeks for the Sprint 94 review. That's it. Thanks.